but we always fell forward just fast enough. And so I didn't really need anyone from the industry to tell me what to do because they all told me why I wouldn't succeed, and here I was succeeding.
All right, I've got Kevin Lavelle here. I was just telling you, we'll see how accurate this intro is. So, you are not the first episode. I already know where you're going to be. I'm going to place you in the exact best spot. All right, in
Okay,
season one. So our listeners have already heard how some of our guests have been introed, but you don't know that, Kevin.
I do not.
So we're going to have a robot intro you. All right, you got to
Okay,
tell me how accurate this is. So we went to
okay, sounds good.
ChatGPT. And ChatGPT knows everything, it seems, about
Well,
everybody.
we'll see.
So I said, hey, I've known my buddy Kevin for over a decade. I know him, but dig up some stuff maybe I don't know about him. Write me a good
Sure,
podcast intro episode. All right, so
great.
tell me what's true and what isn't. 100 words or less. Here we go.
Okay,
Welcome, listeners. Today we're honored to host Kevin Lavelle, the visionary founder of Mizzen and Main, a brand credited with bringing a seismic shift in men's fashion with its performance fabric dress shirts. From his early days as an engineer, Lavelle demonstrated a knack for identifying problems and finding innovative solutions. This led him to observe a congressional staffer's discomfort in the DC heat, sparking the idea for Mizzen and Main. Beyond a successful entrepreneurship, Lavelle is also renowned for his heartfelt initiatives for military veterans. Let's delve into the depths of his journey. You can tell I did not write this. The pivots, the ideas, and his unwavering commitment to impact. What do you think, man? Is that accurate?
that's pretty good. I was smiling at the beginning because I figured it might be Chat GPT, and I've played around with it before, and it got some things wrong about my background. And so that is a more hand wavy, like rah rah, which I appreciate. That was great.
Yeah.
But there were no incorrect facts, maybe some a little over grandiose embellishments, but otherwise, that's pretty good.
Well, you know what Chat GPT is all about? It's about the prompting and the
Right,
prompter. So you had
right.
a world-class prompter on this one. That's me, who knows you
Excellent.
really well. So I did screen it for accuracy, but I think we met. Let's see. I was living off of Walnut Hill in Dallas in 2012, and we definitely met sometime in 2012. When did Mizzen and Main start?
The middle of 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Officially, July something 19th, I think, is when we had our launch party, and then July 26th, I believe, was when we officially hit publish on the website. I think that's correct.
Okay. Okay. So I think I was definitely first year in. Maybe it was sometime late 2012, early 2013. But I remember living at that house. And what I remember doing is and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember communicating with a guy in a faraway land like India or Pakistan or something, because um, you needed help with Facebook ads, and you're like, hey, I've got this company. This was way before. We'll get into like Tim Ferriss land and everything.
Sure.
Way before I remember that conversation too. And I remember exactly how much it cost for you to advertise on Tim Ferriss's podcast. So I'll remind you of that. But I remember you going, man, I need to market the company. And you did not know how to do Facebook ads. And I was like dabbling around. I was doing all a bunch of Facebook stuff. But I remember hiring this guy for you that he was somewhere overseas. But I remember staying up with him late at night, creating Ms. Main Facebook ads. One of my early memories from Mizzen and Main. Um, so take me back, and you know what this show is about. We're going to talk about traps and landmines and all of this stuff, but take me back to the day where you didn't know any better and just starting a company. And what you tell me what you thought it was going to be like. Let's start there. When you started the company, what did you think the first few years are going to be like? And then we'll talk about what actually happened.
Well, I don't know that I've left the land of not knowing what I'm talking about. I've maybe learned a few things along the way. Um, I will say when I had this idea for Mizzen and Main, it was years before we started the company, and launched in July of 2012. I spent about a year trying to get it off the ground and figure out how to make one shirt, figure out how to make the first 1,000 shirts. At the time, Shopify was newish. And so a lot of the challenges of launching a website and an e-commerce brand, frankly, were just made much easier, right? I mean, people who started internet companies had to integrate shopping carts and checkout features and all of that stuff. And Shopify really harmonized all of that.
Yeah.
So that made it a lot easier for me. I will never mince words that I expected things to be a heck of a lot easier. In July of 2012, I launched the world's first performance fabric dress shirt, and I expected us to sell out of the. I think I made 1,000 shirts in the first run because that was the fewest I could possibly make. I expected to sell out of that very quickly because, I mean, facetiously, it was like, here's a flying car, and it costs basically the same as a normal car. And as it turns out, if you build it, they will come is not true. And I've heard that now many times that it's not true, many times from some very bright entrepreneurs. But the world a decade ago was a crowded marketplace. Since then, it's only increased exponentially. But it doesn't matter if you have a great product, and it doesn't matter if you have a great message. You actually have to get it in front of people, and they actually have to make the decision to hand you money. And so learned a great deal over the last decade and in so many ways. But at the very beginning, I expected it to be relatively easy and straightforward. And it was anything but that because I actually had to build the product, which was a long journey. And then we launched, and after I think 2 or 3 days, when some of my friends and family humored me and bought one of our products, which in retrospect weren't that great, but it was an MVP. We got out there, and it was a product that people were excited about. Then our sales on Shopify went to zero, and I realized I have to get this out there. And I just started just getting out there every possible way that I could. I live in Dallas, went to Katy Trail wearing our dress shirt in August in 100 and, I don't know, 10 degrees, and handed out water bottles with our logo on it. And I'm sure people thought I was some sort of religious missionary in some way because I was there in a white dress shirt in 110 degrees. And, well, it turns out that's not a way to sell a dress shirt. I
Mm-hmm.
talked my way into Gold's Gym and had them let me stand up front and try and sell shirts and a little bit of everything. And it was a long, slow year. I think we really started to see more progress after about a year. But for that first year, it was everything I could do for every single sale. And that was just not what I expected.
Well, and I remember we're doing some work together, running some Facebook ads, and you kind of bumped into Tim Ferriss. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I remember the exact number was $7,500 was what it cost. I think I'm
It was
right
more
on
than
that.
that. It was
Okay.
more than that. I, I,
So I
I
remember it
won't,
was like
I,
a bunch of money per episode, right? And
yes.
and we had this conversation. We go, man, that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
but you ended up taking that risk, and it was transformative.
Yeah.
So walk me through that because I think we're all faced sometimes with I don't have a lot. That's a lot of money. It's a big risk. Other people are telling me it might work, or other people are telling me it won't work, but
Mhm.
it feels right. And I don't know if that's what it was for you, but what pushed you to go in that direction to start advertising with Tim?
I could probably do an entire episode of the journey that led me to sponsoring Tim's podcast. I'll hit a couple of the high points. It definitely was more than 7,500, but I will respect the confidentiality of that sponsorship agreement. It was at the time we had just bought our first ad in Esquire magazine. I think it was the end of 2013, if memory serves. We bought a full page ad in Esquire, and it did nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's very hard to track, was an ad in a magazine successful? But I can tell you, every which way we tried to justify spending an enormous amount of money on a full page ad in Esquire was unjustifiable. And I saw on Tim's Twitter feed that he said, basically, I have one sponsorship spot open for next quarter. Let me know if you're interested. I pulled over. I think I was at a stoplight when I read that, and I basically pulled into a parking lot. And on his online form on my iPhone, filled out, "I would like to sponsor you. Here's why." Blah blah blah. Someone from his team, I think, reached out, and there was a little bit of back and forth. And long story short, Kelly Starrett, a guy who is well known in the CrossFit world. He's a big mobility guy. His nickname's Supple Leopard. He's written a bunch of books. Kelly and Tim are good friends, and Kelly was a big fan of Mizzen and Main, and had become a friend. And somehow Tim and Kelly chatted briefly, and Kelly was like, "Yeah, Kevin's legit, and it's a legit product." So Tim and I actually talked on the phone, which, if you have ever read anything about Tim, is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Look, I've tried your product now. I like it. I think I could do a lot for your business, but I got to tell you, if this is make or break, I understand you're a startup, you're really early. If this is make or break, I don't want your money. Like, I don't feel comfortable with that." And I said, nah, we're good. It was just about make or break. It was as close to make or break as you can come. And ultimately, the research that I did helped me understand that even though 90% of people you asked at the time wouldn't know who Tim Ferriss was, the 10% who did know who Tim Ferriss was were like, anything Tim tells me to do, I'm not only going to do it, I'm going to sing it from the rafters to every person I know. And that level of passion, I wasn't looking for something that would hit the entire country. I was looking for some level of convincing people to try the product.
Mm-hmm.
And the short version, I wrote a Medium post about the results. The short version is, we were ROI positive, I think 48 hours after the first episode dropped, for the payment across all 3 episodes. We had to do 3 episodes upfront, cash, wire upfront. And we were net positive ROI, I think within 48 hours, something like that, across all 3. We actually, it broke our systems, it broke our customer service, it broke me mentally dealing with it, because our inventory numbers were not that accurate, and our ability to ship product quickly was not there either. So we had some really pissed off customers. We did our best to resolve it. And actually, I ended up spending some time with Tim later, sort of talking through how does he make sure that when he endorses a product, he doesn't kill the company, because it nearly killed us with how successful it was.
I remember the multi-episode commitment. I remember that conversation that we had. That wasn't just one time; it was multiple, so 3 times. At least you realized that your Shopify website was working. So up to that point,
Yeah,
you weren't,
yeah,
is it
yeah,
me or is it the system? There's no orders coming in. Um,
right.
I remember listening to some episodes with him endorsing it, and it was a very authentic endorsement. I remember, I still
Mm-hmm.
remember it to this day, like the only dress shirt I travel with, right, is something to that
Mm-hmm.
effect. So I think he certainly made a mark on your business. And sometimes, like an Esquire magazine or any other podcast host, it's a little bit of a dice roll. So, do you attribute how much do you attribute that decision to? Was it luck? Was it just you kind of went with your gut on it, but do you feel like you lucked out? Do you feel like you made a really informed decision? Is it 50-50? How do you look at that particular decision?
Um, so I'll maybe try and give a holistic answer there. There are so many things that went well for Mizzen because of luck. And you could say it was luck, but you put yourself in the right position. Your reputation enabled you to get into the room. I would say a great example of luck, while I can attribute myself to being in the right room and having the right reputation, was some of the angel investors that I just happened to meet turned out to be transformative for our company. And I'm happy to unpack that. But like, so fortunate that I happened to be at that cocktail hour, talking to that side of the room, talking to that person. That's a lot of luck. I think the decision with Tim paid off. I think it had nothing to do with luck. And I'm not going to say I'm a genius person who makes all the right decisions. I made plenty of wrong ones. But the analysis ultimately came down to, I'm not just trying to get my name in front of as many millions of people as possible. I need to get people to try our product. And if they try it, they will love it. I was firmly convinced of that. And so it wasn't how big can we possibly go? It was, we need to get big, but it needs to be very targeted and it needs to be very effective. buying an ad in Esquire was a mistake. And it was, we just need a lot of people to see us and then they'll want to buy us. And no, they won't. That's not how it works. But when you have somebody like Tim, who the product endorsement was, if you know me, you know I hate dress shirts, which was like, that's a terrible way to start that
Mm-hmm.
endorsement. And he talks about all of what's wrong with it. And he goes, but Mizzen and Main takes away all of those problems. And while I don't wear a dress shirt all the time when I have to, it's a game changer. And let me tell you how great it actually is. So anyone who listened to Tim that was a regular buyer of dress shirts, like, yeah, I'll give that a shot because Tim endorsed it and it's relevant problem that I encounter. And so I would say it's not luck that that went well. That was a really good decision. And I'd made the opposite of a good decision in a very similar, like, how do we get our name out there just a few months before. And ultimately, it was the lesson I learned through Esquire ad is what helped me make the decision confidently with Tim, despite being terrified that if it doesn't work, we're not totally out of money, but we're pretty close.
Well, so one thing I do want to unpack, because I think this is one of the traps that we can talk about, is you have um, a limited amount of resources, money, time, people, energy, effort, and you have a decision to make whether you can pay, um, a an amount of money to reach the broadest group of people. Maybe that's a lower amount, or a higher amount of money to
Mm-hmm.
target maybe a more specific audience. We're left with these kind of decisions, these forks in the road that you have to make. And so one of the traps that I see a lot of entrepreneurs make is they feel like they just need to get the word out and get it out to everybody and see what kind of sticks to the wall. Um, you tried both, both of those. Um, do you have you're starting a new business right now? We'll talk about that in a bit. How do you go through that decision calculus if you have X amount of dollars to spend? So I'm assuming, like, at your new business, you're going to have a marketing budget, $50,000,
Mm-hmm.
$100,000 or something. How do you go through that decision making on where to spend it? Because now, 10 years later, oh my gosh, there's
Mm-hmm.
like, you can spend your money absolutely anywhere, everywhere. Like, how do you go
Mm-hmm.
through that process and avoid the trap of and I hate, we're like bashing Esquire here. Like, how do you not do the Esquire thing again?
Yeah. I don't know that I'll ever do business with Esquire, especially with the new company that I'm starting. It's not Esquire's fault. For large brands where brand awareness is really critical, it's a great outlet. It was the wrong outlet for a startup where no one knew who we were or what we did. It's not an avenue that will convert people. And so I'll maybe back up. Starting a brand new company and getting product out there from the very beginning, I think, is a very different process in terms of how do you allocate marketing dollars. By the time that we had decided to sponsor Tim's, we were spending money in a variety of mediums and tracking what was working and what wasn't. It wasn't necessarily a lot of money, but we had a relatively decent understanding of what our ROI was. Um, in the new company, I'll have basically a couple different buckets of how I'm going to go spend money. And I'll spend a very little bit in a few different channels and understand what's working and what's not working and be exceptionally tight in, okay, this is working. Let's try more of it. And we may end up finding for one of these channels, there is an upper bounds of ROI. You can spend more on the channel and it's just not going to return. But ultimately, you need to have the right strategy of how are you going to reach your consumer? Where are they? Are you looking for them to just be aware or are you looking for them to convert? And I think there's this understandable gap in understanding of, well, I'll just buy some Facebook ads. And besides the fact that that's more difficult, more expensive, less ROI on a consistent basis, that may not be where your customers are. And I mean, let's just use Facebook as an example. There are multiple segments of the country that don't engage with Facebook in any way, shape, or form across any of their platforms. And so if you're just thinking I will reach people there, well, if your people aren't there, if your customers aren't there, then you aren't going to convert. And that sounds so simple to say with something as straightforward as Facebook, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of unpack that. And so um, ultimately, it comes down to building a demand plan and understanding how much of what you're doing is prospecting and trying to go just find people, how much of what you're trying to do is retargeting. And hey, they've already seen you or engaged with you, and you're going to basically chase them around the internet. And for all of the pros of internet advertising and traceability and trackability, you still got to do things offline. You have to do events and activations and meet people where they are. And our Mizzen and Maine, we over the last couple of years have started working with elementary schools, and understanding that a lot of our customers are dads at these elementary schools, and so we sponsor some of the events. And some cases it's a nonprofit donation for the different types of groups that we're working with, and in others it's literally just sponsor this event. It's $5,000, and here's what you get for it. And there is no straightforward answer as to how to create or allocate that budget. It is all about understanding your overall strategy, where are your customers, and then testing and learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a good segue to something I know that you want to talk about, which is um, advice from others. Right? Is like
Yeah.
when do you um, do what people tell you to do because they have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of experience. They know more than you. You know they know more than you, and you should just do it versus taking in their feedback, getting their point of view, synthesizing that, understanding where you are in your business,
Mm-hmm.
and that being kind of a compromise in terms of how you form your decision. So, the athlete sponsoring companies thing has been around for a really long time, and I'm sure people told you this is how you need to do the deal or this is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I had a similar experience with that with Emmett Smith. He's one of my business partners, and sounds like with you, like we had constrained resources, we had goals that we needed to achieve. We're a small company. I thought about it from the sense that, okay, I can't compete with, like you said, Reebok. Like that's just off the table. I
Mm-hmm.
can't come to the table with more money than Reebok, or in Emmett's case, more money than
Mm-hmm.
Herradura Tequila or somewhere else. Um, I really got into the psychology of who is Emmett Smith right now? Who does he want to be in the future?
Yep.
What is his vision for himself? And I got a really good understanding of that. And that helped me shape my pitch to Emmett. And what I found out through research is that Emmett was moving from NFL Hall of Famer to businessman. And he learned a lot from
Mm-hmm.
Roger Staubach about business and commercial real estate. And his vision for himself in the future was to be Emmett Smith, the businessman, and specifically the business owner. He wanted to be an owner of businesses. And that
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary was really important to him, that he could call himself an owner of businesses. And so when I pitched Emmett, um, maybe some of it was luck. Maybe it was like, to your point, like you do your research and you learn. I went in with this is what we're going to do for the Emmett Smith brand because
Mm-hmm.
we know where you want to go,
Yeah.
and we wove that in, right. So it was Emmett Smith the gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
Emmett Smith the businessman, and we made him a co-owner in the business because we know that that was important to him, right. So you go out to the world and say, I'm not
Yes.
just a spokesperson, right. I
Yes.
own things,
Yes.
and so taking that as a segue into, you're starting a new business now. You started a business, um, over a decade ago. How are you thinking about? And because I do think this is a trap, which is like, you know what, you've been doing it for 20 years. I'll just do the deal the way you want me to do it. Versus you've been doing it a long time. Let me hear you, but I may not make the same
Mm-hmm.
decision. How do you not fall into the trap of making poor decisions, either two extremes, right? Make a poor decision by not listening to anybody because I'm Mr. Independent
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, it's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's one extreme, make poor decisions. The other extreme is
Mm-hmm.
just tell me what to do. You've done it, you've built and sold a similar
Mm-hmm.
company. How do you navigate that?
So, um, in the very beginning, the job of a founder is to bring the thing to life and get it to whatever the next phase is. Once you get there, you got to reassess the caliber of your team and your strategy, and do you have the resources to get to the next phase? And so different businesses are absolutely going to require different inputs, different guidance, different experience, different talent, all of that. So with that caveat, when I started Mizzen and Main, before I started with the few people that I shared the idea with, and then realistically for the first few years, basically every person with experience in the industry told me what a dumb idea it was, or why it wasn't going to succeed, or why I wouldn't succeed, we wouldn't succeed. And so I asked some people for guidance, um, but that number decreased and decreased. Like, if you had any experience in the industry, I got less and less interested in talking to you. In some cases, when it comes to going to a trade show, okay, how does a trade show work? What should I think about? That's like very tactical advice that doesn't matter what product I'm selling. It's just literally, how does a trade show work? Okay, I would still get some of that guidance, but there was actually one person in the pantheon of apparel leaders who did not tell me it was a dumb idea. That was Damon John. He was actually incredibly supportive and gave me a lot of good guidance that meant a lot to me. But other than that, it was really just a constant getting bashed in the head of why we weren't going to succeed. Mm-hmm. So I got to the point that I just stopped asking anybody in the industry for any guidance. I would go to trade shows once I figured out how to do that, and all the menswear experts just basically took a giant dump on us every time they saw us. My customers would never wear that. Oh, just like turn their nose up at us. Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, we sold 1,000 shirts, and then we sold 5,000, and then we sold 10,000. And, they would tell us why their customers would never wear it. And like, well, they're buying it from me. So good luck to you, sir. And I describe this experience of Mizzen and Main as, imagine you're carrying something down a steep hill and you start to trip, but you trip forward fast enough that your feet always end up just far enough in front of you, but the thing that you're carrying is shaking and it's near disaster. That was Mizzen and Main for many, many, many years. But we always fell forward just fast enough. And so I didn't really need anyone from the industry to tell me what to do, because they all told me why I wouldn't succeed, and here I was succeeding. And for a while, almost every single thing that we made, we sold out of. When we introduced what became our signature product, the Leeward shirt, we had 4 styles. I think we, at the time, made maybe 2,000 units of each style. And we sold out of that in like 6 weeks, less. I mean, we sold out of like 90% of it within 2 to 3 weeks, and then we were out of it and actually ran into the problem of not having enough product. And so for someone to come in and tell me why I needed to do something differently just felt silly, because we were succeeding and everyone kept poo-pooing our idea. Thankfully, I got some good wake-up calls, and I will never forget, we were interviewing a prospective board member to join our company. And ultimately, we went with someone with just a little bit more relevant experience, who was also a great board member. But this woman said to me, "Tell me about your planning function in Mizzen and Main." And I was like, "Why don't you tell me what a planning function is, and then I'll tell you how we do that." And she just sort of put her hands on her head and she goes, "Listen, I don't care. Like, I'd love to join you on the board. I think we'd work well together. But promise me that no matter what happens after we conclude this interview, that you go hire a planner." And I'm overgeneralizing here, but it was like, why do I need to spend $100,000 on a planner to tell me how much to make when I sell out of everything? And she basically said, "Because, you idiot, you're going to be wrong. And oh, by the way, you're selling out of everything. What if you didn't sell out of everything, but continued to have enough product to sell?" I was like, that's a really good point. And so that sort of got me back on this train of, I need to surround myself with brilliant people who've been here before. And if I think that their advice is wrong, it's my job as a CEO to streamline and synthesize that advice and then make decisions for the company. And don't get me wrong, like, I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think that I was invincible, but the people that I was talking to weren't all that helpful. So as I'm launching this new company, I have spent the last year talking to a lot of people people in adjacent spaces, people in directly competitive spaces. It's it's a consumer product, and we're building hardware and adjacent services and software around it. And so I'm talking to every single person who will give me the time of day. And I'm just trying to ensure that I absorb as much information as possible so that I can then make the best decision. And that is a real shift for me, because now I have enough of a track record that people go, all right, you're not, this time around, as I've been pitching what I've been building, I would summarize it by a lot of people saying, well, you're clearly not a moron because you've had some success with one company. I don't necessarily love the idea, but I must, I must be wrong. Let's see what happens next.
Mm,
And that's a nice shift. People, still not necessarily, most people don't believe in new ideas until you prove it.
hmm.
But they're less so telling me why I'm such a moron for trying to pursue it. So that's a nice change.
Yeah. Um, it is nice to for people to think you're an idiot, but actually not have the courage to say it because you've actually done something that's not idiotic.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a lot easier to say you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. You've never started a business before. So, yeah, people are going to
Sure.
think all kinds of things about you for sure. Okay, we're going to take like a hard left turn and then we're going to take a hard
Yeah.
right turn. The hard left turn is,
Great.
you've probably been looking at me, Kevin, saying, man, why does he have such great hair and perfectly styled hair? And I
Mm.
was,
I do think that.
and I could read your mind and you could probably read mine. I was thinking the same thing about you. Now you can just totally lie on the show. It's completely acceptable to lie, but this is what I'm using in my hair, which is the Rascal
Nice.
Edgar's Edge, and
Yep.
this
Very good.
this is the number one selling pomade of all Rascal products. It's actually cool story about this. And you value team members staying with you a long time. This is the hard right turn is going to talk about Jen and Lauren, our amazing wives and partners. I've had a team member that's been with me from day one. Her name is Idella Edgar, and we named this product Edgar's Edge after her. She's been with us 15
Nice.
years, and it immediately became the number one selling product out of every single. So you go to the Gents place, out of every product that is at the Gents place, everything on that shelf, this sells more than everything else. So I wanted to answer that question in your head that you did not share with me. Has been, how do you keep your hair looking so great? I've answered that for you and for the rest of the audience.
Thank you.
And we're going to assume that you're using Rascal products in your hair, even if you're not. So
I like the assumption. It's a good one.
okay. So we're just going to go with that. Um, hard right turn, Jen. I met you guys when right around when you got married. Did not have any kids yet. You had two beautiful dogs that mauled me every time I came to the office. And they were
Yes.
like bigger than me, which I'm not a very big guy, but they were bigger than me and would crawl up in my lap, which I'm a dog person. I appreciate. Um, I really believe in entrepreneurship that part of being untrapped and entrapping yourself is you've got to have a great support system. And if you're married, that means your spouse has got to be on board one way or the other. Doesn't mean that they're involved in the business
Hmm.
necessarily. Could be that you've made a decision they're not involved in the business and you don't talk about business things. There's all kind of different ways to put that together. But you've had an amazing partner in business, an amazing wife, now mother of your children. Um, in terms of trying to untrap yourself as an entrepreneur with being married or doing business with family, how have you navigated that? Has that been a journey? Has it changed over time, over 11 and a half, 12 years?
Certainly has changed, in so many ways. Unpacking a little bit more of the question, Jen and I actually ended up working together. She had a full time job for the first, I want to say, 18 to 24 months of Nizen so that we could keep ourselves afloat as a family because I didn't pay myself for a long time. Um, and then came on board full time as our CMO. That was her background, I think, mid 2014, and then stand of 2017. And um, the experience of working together was so rewarding. When we met, I proposed to Jen very quickly, about 6 months after we met, and our lives just we were. You talked about untrapped. We were like immediately stuck together. Our energy field, or whatever you want to say, we just immediately were glued together. Um, I had a great job at a nice, great energy firm here in Dallas, and life was on the up and up. And on our honeymoon, I talked about the idea for Mizzen for years, but on our honeymoon, we got married in April of 2012. I said, "This is it. It's time. It's go time to go build Mizzen for real." And so she went from married to, guy who wore a suit and tie every day, went to a very reputable big company, to I'm an entrepreneur and I work out of my house. And there are days that I didn't take a shower because I just went and sat at my computer and didn't get up all day. Um, our experience of working together was so incredible, and was really strengthening and affirming in our marriage and our relationship. I also get why it's a terrible idea for probably most people. And I'm not saying that because I think we're better. It's just the way that we work together, our personalities, our overlap, our Venn diagram. It was a really healthy blend for us. And our lives, our future, it all came down to, we felt like, especially at the time, the success of Mizzen and Main. And so to do that together, she got to see why I was so stressed out about our vendor calls. And when, something went wrong, she was there actively as a participant in resolving that, and hiring. And, the absolute most magical and best part of building a company is the incredible people that you get to work with and you get to see do extraordinary things. So many of whom, I saw achieve beyond their wildest imagination of what they thought they were capable of. That will always be the most rewarding aspect of starting a business. The worst part about starting a business is what people will say about you and do to you, despite the trust and the friendship and the partnership that can happen. And so when those things happen, we would go home at night and talk about them and work through those things together. And so for us, it was a strengthening aspect of our marriage and our bond. Um, Depending on personalities, I would strongly advise against it for realistically most married couples. And it's not a bad thing. To me, it's a lot like, most people are not entrepreneurs. Most people are not business owners. It's not better. It's just different. Um, I do not enjoy finance or accounting. Um, that doesn't make me better or worse. It's just not my skill set. It's not the thing that I want to be spending time on. So, um, all of that to say, in talking about having this conversation today with you, one of the things that I highlighted is, I think the best decision I've made in my entire life was marrying Jen. And it wouldn't have been possible to build Mizzen and Main, not least of which without Jen as my partner in the business, because of the very critical role that she played in the foundational years of our business, but also in building a company. It is so profoundly difficult and draining and exhausting. And you've got to have somebody that's okay with that ride. And not being okay with that ride, that's okay too. Some people just, that's not what they want out of life, and that's okay. But if you want to go on that ride, you got to have somebody that's ready to do it with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, building Mizzen specifically, a big part of building the business was me out there. I was going to conferences. I was going to trade shows. I was going to visit factories. I was and have been on the road a lot for a long time. That's hard. And Jen didn't like me being gone, but was supportive and understanding because of what we wanted to try and build together. So that's a very long answer to that question. And you know, we now have two great kids. Jen gave birth at the end of 2016. I signed the term sheet for our growth investment from El Caterton, the world's largest consumer retail private equity firm, in the delivery room for Jack, our first. We closed the deal 3 months later. So trying to close my first ever private equity deal with a couple week old into a couple month old. Those were some very long months. And basically, at the end of 2017, our son was almost one. Jen said it's time for us to find somebody who can give every fiber of their being to growing this business on the marketing front. I want to focus on spending time with Jack, and now our daughter was born a couple of years later. Um, so that was a hard transition because we'd spent every minute together for so many years,
Mhm.
right? If you think about going into an office every day, most people spend more time with their coworkers if you work in an office than with their own family. But Jen and I got to have just the best of both worlds there. So that was a tough transition, but also one of those things where we sort of looked back fondly on the experience that we got to have and said, life is in the transitions and transitions are happening.
Mhm. It's been beautiful to watch, man, and we love both you guys and your family, and just seeing you go from newly married to happily married to happy parents, and continuing to add value to society through great products that you're creating. And we didn't get to touch on it on today's episode, but the work that both of us do for the military community. We've got a huge heart for veterans, and so I appreciate everything that you've done to
Yeah,
date with the veteran
likewise.
community. And I'm sure there's going to be a social impact component in the new business that you're starting, because that's just the way you roll.
Yeah,
Um, I know you're in stealth mode, so I want to leave our listeners with a little
yeah.
teaser of what's next. So you share whatever you want with what you're doing, and if you've got some place they can find you, fine. If not, then we'll just be googling your name every 30 days to try to see if you're up.
Perfect. I would say our focus is on helping parents and young kids, and we're building a consumer product and associated services. So stay tuned. Right now, I would say just you can find me on Twitter at Kevin S. Lavelle or LinkedIn, um, and we'll start posting some updates there. We'll be very public in everything we're doing soon enough, but we still have some work to do, heads down, before we can introduce ourselves to the world. It's honestly, I wasn't sure I would ever do it again when I stepped down from Mizzen a couple of years ago. I'm still involved with the company, but not day to day. I wasn't sure I'd ever do it again. And after being away from it for a few years, I realized that it is where I feel like I am uh, most capable of creating value for society and my family and team members and investors. Uh, and so I've had this idea for many years since being a dad, and I think that it will really be a game changer for families and childhood wellness. So look forward to sharing more in the months ahead, and ultimately getting to do it a second time is such a privilege because I can skip a lot of the enormous headaches that I had the first time around. And I'll leave everybody with one very important piece of advice when starting a company. Don't register your company, LLC, C Corp, whatever, with your home address or your personal cell phone. Get a mailbox and get a Google Voice number so that you will not be absolutely drowning in all sorts of spam. We already have enough of that problem, but that's a very tactical lesson I learned from the first time.
I'm going to add on to that these fancy phones now, you can have two lines on the
Yeah.
same phone. There's a eSIM. And so I have a second line on this same phone that very few people have, because you're right. My cell phone number is on every single LLC formation doc, which is like 15
Mm-hmm.
entities. And so I am
Yep.
sold every product and service imaginable
Mm-hmm.
to humankind
Yes.
on that number.
Yep.
Um, all
Yep.
right, man. Well, hey, it was great chatting with you and catching up. It's been a while, and appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared, and looking forward to keeping track of what you're doing next. Thanks, brother.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ben, and thanks for sharing some good lessons for entrepreneurs everywhere.
You bet.